hello, and Happy New Year, everyone. And welcome to the Urban League of Rochester's 2026 Interrupt Racism Speaker Series. I hope you all had a joyous, peaceful, hopefully restful holiday season, and that you're all re-energized and ready to be actively engaged for 2026, because we are going to need it. When we planned today's discussion, we had no idea how timely and meaningful this conversation would be. If you haven't been tuned in, just this week, we have seen the killing of Renee Nicole Good, a mother of 3 young children in Minneapolis. And just last night, the shooting of a husband and wife in Portland, Oregon, both at the hands of ICE agents. And while the investigations have not been done, we do not know the specific facts of each case, so I'm not making any judgments. What I do know is that something is terribly wrong with the way things are happening in this country. And we, the people, are the only ones who can do something about it. And we must. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Dr. Candace Lucas, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Senior Vice President leading our equity and advocacy initiatives at the Urban League of Rochester. I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Shannon Riegelsberger, who will be assisting with our technology and monitoring the chat. I want to thank you all for choosing to join us for this discussion today. And my hope is that you take the opportunity to fully engage with our speaker, ask questions, make sure you're informed, but more importantly, use what you learned today to make a plan to exercise your rights responsibly and effectively to protect yourself and those you love. We are certainly living in uncertain times, but the Urban League's commitment to this community has not changed. As one of 92 affiliates of the National Urban League, we are Rochester's civil rights organization. And it is our mission to interrupt and dismantle systems of racism, oppression, and inequity that deprive historically disadvantaged peoples from exercising their civil rights and expressing their full humanity. We are a nonpartisan 501c3 organization, and as such, we do not endorse any particular political views. However, as a civil rights organization, we understand and respect the right to free speech and serve as a safe platform for all to express their individual beliefs, because this is not the moment to be silent. This is the time to be resolute in your beliefs of fairness, of justice, and of humanity. This is a time to use your voices, your actions, and your resources to drive progress and positive change for our community. So with that, I am honored to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Donald Thompson of ETKS Law. Don and I go back about 20 years to a time when I actually needed a lawyer and I didn't know who to call. So I asked a friend for a referral. And what that person said to me was, if I was in trouble, the only person I would want by my side is Donald Thompson. And so with that recommendation, I gave Don a call and he did not disappoint. And my family owes him a great deal. And it is now such a pleasure for me to be reacquainted with him as a colleague in advocacy. So Don has been practicing for over 30 years, and part of his practice is dedicated to representing persons whose civil rights have been violated. He has devoted his career to representing persons accused of crimes at trial, on appeal, and in post-appellate proceedings. He has represented death row inmates in conjunction with the Southern Poverty Law Center. He has argued before the United States Supreme Court. He has worked with the Innocence Project to obtain the release and exoneration of wrongfully convicted defendants. Now, Don has a lengthy and impressive bio. So just for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it all to you now, but I do encourage you to read it in its entirety when you have a moment. So we want to get right to Don in this really important conversation that we're going to have today. But before we do that, I'm just going to ask you to please make sure your mics are muted. We want to prevent any background noise or private conversations from distracting from his remarks. And if you hear anything that resonates with you, please use your reaction buttons or put your questions or comments in the chat so that we can keep track of that. We will have ample time at the end for Q&A, so don't worry about that as well. But with that, I'm going to ask Don to take it from here. So Don, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas. Now I'm going to have to try to live up to that introduction. We'll see what I can do. Shannon, this question for you. Do I share my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let me do that first before I mess anything else up and see if we're going to be in the right spot here. So here we go. And good. Okay, I got the thumbs up from Shannon, so we're good to go. All right. So topic of our conversation today, illegal, immoral, or both, ICE in the Trump era. So here's just a little caveat. 5 days ago, I had a completely different presentation. And given the most recent developments, I had to scrap all of that and present, I think, something maybe a little bit more useful for you guys. Hopefully it is. Forgive me if it's a little bit disjointed. Hopefully it's not. I try to get things together quickly enough here. But so if we're thinking about illegal, immoral, or both, we're not going to have a lot of discussion about immoral today. If you have any question that everything that's happening here is immoral, if you're not already sold on that, you might be in the wrong place. Everything that is taking place is immoral. The question, I guess, is the legality of it, and what does that mean for us these days? So, I presume that you are here and that you are interested in these topics because one of the questions that follows from this is, well, what can I do? What am I able to do as far as the law is concerned? What am I morally obligated or able to do? And how do we navigate the intersection of those two areas? Well, here's Rob Reiner, his memory be a blessing, had a nice statement about basically our obligations as citizens. Silence in the face of authoritarianism is complicity. Speaking out is a patriotic act. Democracy doesn't defend itself. It requires participation, vigilance, and courage from ordinary people. And I assume that you may be here and interested in this presentation because you're interested in engaging in participation and vigilance and everything else. Well, we also then have this. Whoop.
You're working very hard not to have to say the words out loud, right?
I'm going to probably say, there's the other caveat. I'm going to say those words probably throughout the course of this presentation. So, that is not necessarily the position of the Urban League, but I am physiologically incapable of uttering a sentence without an expletive in it for the most part. So, if that's a problem for you, you may want to check out now. Okay, so.
So for everyone, this is an R-rated presentation.
Yes. Yeah, there we go. So the message here to ICE is on the screen, but the message really to the citizens of Minneapolis is more important in the time that we have here to consider this. And no, I can't do it. So it just looks like a screenshot. I've done PowerPoints before and thought I knew how to do them, but I was wrong. So that kind of is a good counterpoint to the Rob Reiner overview of what we're obligated to do and what can we do and how do we respond. So how do you respond in the intersection of these two conflicting interests? So safety versus citizenship. And I think this is something for me anyway that's changed in the last 5 days. The question of whether something is legal or not turns upon, is there going to be any respect for the law or not? Is that standard going to hold when we are having interactions with our government or our government agents? So, who remembers A Man for All Seasons, right? Where, Sir Thomas More asks Roper, would you take down all the laws to go after the devil himself? And Roper says, I would. And Thomas More says, and after the last law was down and the devil turned around on you, where would you hide? I think that's kind of the intersection that we may find ourselves at the moment. So I think some of the advice or the suggestions that I'm going to give you today are not so much legal. We'll try not to turn this into a law school class, but more practical in the sort of landscape that we find ourselves in these days. So first of all, easy questions. What can you do? What can you do safely? Join. You are not helpless. You are, you are able to exercise power. Don't drink the Kool-Aid that those in authority would like you to drink, to believe that you are helpless and that there's nothing that you can do. There's plenty that you can do. Remember, they talk about, well, there's no guardrails in the current administration. But you know how guardrails work. There's a post and a post and a post and a post, and all the posts separately really don't do much. But when you join the posts together, you keep the car from going into the ditch. So, all of us can be part of those guardrails. So here's what you can do. So this was downtown Minneapolis 2 nights ago. You can let the authorities know that you're not going to stand for this. And if there's a group, it's more powerful and it's more safe. So what else can you do? Best advice I can give you today, probably record. Record. Those of us who are more mature sometimes forget that we have a movie camera in our pockets all of the time. It's up to you to create the public record and to force accountability. If you've been watching online or you've been watching the news, you saw Kristi Noem try to have a press conference where she lied about everything that happened with respect to Renee Good, but she couldn't really because there was a video record from a couple of different angles. So you can say whatever you want to say, but if citizens are making a record of what's actually happening, then your ability to lie about what you've done and what others have done is limited by that record. And that's important, maybe one of the most important things that you can do. So, as I said, it's all immoral. Let's talk about the legal side of things. Where are the legal standards for some of these interactions? Presuming you're thinking that you might want to take action, you might want to do something, you might encounter ICE agents or other law enforcement. As a result of that, what are we legally permitted to do and what should we do? Okay. Car stops. So one of the questions that I saw earlier on is, I'm in my car, and masked men claiming to be ICE tell me to get out. Do I have to? Well, the question's a little bit incomplete because it depends on why they're approaching your car and what's the reason for their interaction. Did they stop your car? Was your car parked? Is your car blocking some other type of access? Let's assume for our purposes that your car is just parked. You're sitting there. You're on the side of the road. You're not blocking anybody. You just happen to be in your car. Do I have to get out? What does the law say? The law says you don't. The law says that they have to have a legal basis to ask you to exit your vehicle. You should be prepared to show your license, your registration, assuming that they're going to claim some vehicle traffic infraction. Show your license, your registration, your insurance card, if you have that available. But over and above that, what is the offense? What is the crime that leads to the request, get out of the car? You're entitled to know that. You can ask why. Now, anytime you ask a law enforcement officer why, that goes over the line into criminally pissing off a cop. So we're going to talk about some of the consequences of criminally pissing off a cop later on. But you have the right to know why you're being asked to exit the vehicle. And let me tell you, if you don't, then the top of their head blows off. They don't like not being responded to in a yes sir, no sir manner. What happens at that point? Well, if you got a passenger, they should be recording by now, for one thing. I've had, long before any of this stuff took place, I've had clients who will roll the window down a crack and hand out their license and their registration and their insurance. And that just drives the officers insane. But absent a basis for them to say, well, we think there are weapons in the car or something like that, you don't have to get out of the car. Now, they might try to take you out of the car. And, they, as we've seen, are willing now under this administration, and I think it trickles down, this messaging, to exercise lawless violence. So be safe. Be safe. Whatever the law says, whoops, here we are. So, same thing with, let's talk about street encounters here. Let's say this is not at a protest. This just happens to be, you're walking down the sidewalk, or, you go into the store, something like that. You're not in a group of, 100 other people who are engaged in a protest. Do you have to tell, presuming it's ICE, and you want to look at the uniform that they're wearing? What's the insignia on the uniform? What's the information that's available from that? Know which agency is involved, but let's presume that it's ICE. It says ICE on the chest and police, which is their standard, kind of operating procedure. Do you have to tell them who they are, who you are, if they ask? No, you don't. Do you have to show ID? No, you don't. You want to have it available. they can, and they can trump up, some kind of, no pun intended there, sorry, some kind of reason to say that they need to investigate further, in which case you want to have identification available to display. I was on a kind of a Facebook thread last night, and one of the suggestions was, have a passport with you. Well, if you have a passport, I think that's not a bad idea. I mean, any question that you're an American citizen? Not if I've got an American passport, there isn't. So, you've got a license, yeah, that's great. Whatever you happen to have for identification. Be aware of 18 USC 1001. Lying to a federal agent is a federal felony. Now, I find this ironic because they can lie to you, and they do, all the time. We have to ask you a few questions. We're investigating theft at this 7-Eleven around the corner, and the video has you leaving that store. We just want to talk to you. This is just a routine check. All lies, potentially, but they're permitted to lie to you, ostensibly to try to get you to tell the truth, which is the irony that I see there. But don't sell this short. I have a police detective who we just went through a trial with, a federal trial, because the federal authorities accused him of lying to an FBI agent. So what does it take for that kind of a charge or that kind of an accusation? Well, what it takes is the FBI agent has to think that you lied. There doesn't have to be solid proof that you lied. If they think that you lied, then that's enough to charge you. You don't want to get charged because it's a long road from that point to being exonerated, for example. So what should you do in those circumstances? Shut the fuck up. Don't talk to them. My clients never, ever, ever talk to federal agents. Never. Because I know about this rule and they don't. My police detective, for example, didn't know that this was a federal rule and was a little bit frustrated by it. He's like, well, people lie to me all the time. Yeah, well, there's not a state rule that says they can't, but there is a federal rule that says that if you lie or a federal agent thinks you lied to them, you may be charged with a felony. What's a felony? A felony is a charge that you could do more than a year for. My particular police detective faced a sentence of up to 8 years for allegedly lying to an FBI agent, which was just completely bogus. But, he fell into the trap that you might likely fall into as well. Sort of. The FBI agent is a friendly guy. It's just he wants to talk to another law enforcement agent. It's just a law enforcement investigation. We're just cops here talking together. And all of a sudden the FBI agent thinks, well, this guy has lied to me, so I'm going to have him charged. So don't do it. You don't have to. You have a Fifth Amendment right. You have a right to a lawyer. If you're going to say anything at all, that right to remain silent is waived far too easily by far too many people. But if you're going to say anything at all, it should be, I'm not talking without my lawyer. Well, what about this? We just want to clear this up and close the file. I'm not talking without my lawyer. Okay, now is a time when being conciliatory and being polite and being, kind of go along, get along is going to be not only not good, but potentially dangerous for you. They are trained law enforcement officers. Now, assuming these ICE agents are in fact law enforcement officers that have received some training, and they're not just like mall cops who got a $50,000 bonus for signing up. They have training in how to do this. One of the trainings is specifically how to interact with people to get them to answer questions. Okay. So realize that they are professionals in this area, or quasi-professionals in this area anyway, and you're not. So don't go sparring with them. Keep your mouth shut. So on to the next, home invasions, or attempted home invasions, let's say. First rule is the door. Keep it closed. Don't open the door. If you're going to have an interaction with an ICE agent, and if they're an actual ICE agent, a law enforcement agent that's received some type of a training, the doorway, the threshold of the doorway it's like one of those things on Star Trek where you go into another dimension if you cross it, right? They just want to get you to come outside, because if you're outside, you can be arrested. You can be handcuffed. You can go down to the police station with them, and there's not anything you can do about it. They recognize, if they've had any training, that they cannot enter the home without an exigent circumstance. They're chasing the guy with a gun, for example, or a warrant. So, if they have any training, that at least is a barrier for them. It's an internal mental barrier for them, because they know they can't cross the threshold unless they have a legal basis to do it. Don't open the door. I've had a number of clients who get pulled out when they open the door. Well, we just want to talk to you. Okay, fine. Let's talk through the door. No, you got to come out here. We want you to come out here. We just want to talk. Well, how many of you are there? Well, there's 3 of us. We'll talk to each other then. You don't have to talk to me. So, again, keep in mind, either state or federal law enforcement is permitted to lie to you to get you to comply with their requests. We need to ask you questions. Okay, ask them. What are they? Speak into the Ring camera so I can hear you. Warrants, they'll say, well, they may say, we have a warrant. Let's see the warrant. Well, you have to come out here so you can see it. Nope. Slide it under the door if that's possible. If you've got like the little side lights, hold it up to the side light. What they need is a warrant signed by a judge. What they often have is an administrative document. It's an I-200, which is an ICE document signed by some administrator, not a judge. If the warrant does not have a judicial signature, it's not worth the paper it's written on. So do not. The other good idea is, if you're having a consultation or a confrontation, I guess, with these folks at your doorway, there and some of the resources later on will point you to this or help you do this. If you have a relationship with an attorney, which isn't a bad thing to have up front, you might want to have that attorney on the phone while this is going on. Now, this is asking a lot. Now, I couldn't manage the PowerPoint presentation here myself very well earlier on, but if you can have the attorney on the phone and you can film, even better. So that accountability is a great thing. If you've got a Ring doorbell, you don't have to worry about the filming so much, I guess. But rule number 1 is the door. So I had a question from earlier, I guess it was Facebook threads or posts. Well, I work in this community shop, and we don't want ICE to come into the shop. And what do we do about that? And are there any restrictions that we could place upon that? Well, they can enter public areas. So if it's a publicly accessible area, there's no restriction on them entering. What you can do, or if you choose to, is you can make what were previously publicly accessible areas not accessible to the public. It's not going to work at Target, or it's not going to work at Wegmans, but if you have another retail establishment where you want to limit the public access, you're permitted to do that. And what's the standard? Well, if there's not public accessibility, the standard is, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in that area? Like your home, certainly you do. Your home's your castle, that whole thing. You can construct that type of an area or a protection within other spaces, but you need to specifically do that. If it's an accessible area, if it's Chipotle or Taco Bell or whatever, the agents can enter freely. There's no restriction on that. And you can put the sign on the door that says, well, ICE agents aren't permitted to enter. And I think that's of limited utility. So then people say, well, okay, we are at a protest now. We're out at a protest, and I see ICE beating someone. What should I do? Again, back to the first rule: record it. You can always record it. Now, our own Emily Good, pursued this issue about a decade ago here locally, and nailed down the rule, which was always a rule, but made it clear here. And it's been made clear federally as well. You're permitted to record police activity so long as you're not interfering. So if you are at a distance where you're not obstructing any police activity and you're not otherwise interfering with the police activity, there's no restriction on you recording. You should do it. Can I intervene? The law on that is pretty complicated, actually. Again, we'll try to avoid having a law school class here. The circumstances under which you can intervene are pretty limited, and you don't know what they are, pretty much, because you haven't been to law school. And you know what? The law enforcement agents don't know what they are either, and they don't care for the most part. They're doing their job, and anybody that gets in the way is going to bear the brunt of that. So, should I intervene? No, you probably shouldn't. For your own safety, you should not intervene. There are people who might anyway, but my suggestion to you is let's be prepared to protest on another day. Let's not create a dangerous situation for ourselves. What could happen if you do intervene? Well, if you're observing and recording, let's go back here, and they don't like it, or if you actively intervene in a way where you are, for example, forming a barrier, or you are attempting to protect someone who is being subjected to physical violence. Well, pepper spray and tear gas are a couple of their favorites. Those get employed pretty regularly. If you are a pregnant woman or a woman who's trying to get pregnant, you should be aware that both pepper spray and tear gas can interrupt or impair the menstrual cycle, which is right on the warning labels, by the way, which you don't get to see, but the cops have those warning labels on the canisters that they employ. Just a little bit of background. I'm one of probably 10 or 12 attorneys that are together representing the protesters from the Daniel Prude protests that we had here several years ago, and we have a whole spectrum of different injuries. Some of the injuries are only violations to civil rights, the right to speak out, to protest peacefully, those types of injuries. There are other physical injuries from police officers targeting people with pepper spray balls or tear gas canisters. We have a whole class of women whose menstrual cycles were impacted by exposure to pepper spray or tear gas. And we have other people who were seriously injured. One fellow lost an eye because he was targeted with a tear gas canister to the face, for example. So, will they employ violence in a circumstance like that if they believe that you are impairing law enforcement action? Yeah, I mean, frequently they will. Whether that's legal or not is not going to save you in the moment. And frankly, they don't care. I mean, this is, if you've been to protests, I assume a lot of you have been to protests. I've been to a lot of protests. The testosterone kind of takes over and they just become like raging bulls at some point. So there's not a lot of legal nicety at that point as to where the line is going to be drawn. You can be escorted to the ground, as they euphemistically call it. They can grab you and slam you down. At which point in time, I think it's their training to start yelling at you, stop resisting, as they're beating the stuffing out of you. You can also be arrested and charged, whether or not there's any basis for those charges. So let's talk quickly about, there are a lot of lists online about what you should do to prepare. If you're going to go to a protest, if you think you're going to beforehand have an encounter with a law enforcement agent or an ICE agent, like you're going to a protest and you think you might have that kind of encounter, here are some of the things that you want to have. You want to talk to your attorney beforehand, have them basically available. It's easier to speak to them if they happen to be in the holding cell next to you. Do you take your phone or do you not take your phone? That's a judgment call. You don't want to have facial recognition. You don't want to have easy access to your phone. They can't lawfully ask you to open your phone or direct you to open your phone. Do you want to take a burner phone? I mean, something to think about beforehand. There are rights cards here that I will point you to later on. So you don't have to remember all this stuff and you don't have to say anything. You can just show them the rights card. Don't bring any contraband with you. That's a bad idea. I realize that it'd be a lot easier if you had a little bit of weed to kind of mellow you out. I don't think you should do it when you go to a protest. Do take anything that you need, like inhalers or medications. I've been at protests where people didn't have their inhalers. And, all of a sudden they're in a medical circumstance that they didn't plan on. It's just like hiking. Let somebody know where you're going. Let them know when you're going to be back. Utilize the buddy system. Take water. Take energy bars. I always take an umbrella. I like the little folding ones in case of a pop-up shower of rain or pepper spray or whatever. So if you're arrested, you could be arrested. You could be arrested for no fucking legitimate reason. Recognize that. Make your peace with it beforehand. That could happen. What do you do? Have a Fifth Amendment? I want a lawyer. If you have one of these rights cards, all you have to do is display the rights cards. You don't have to memorize anything. You don't have to do anything. If you get a call either your important contact person or call your lawyer. If you have medications, be sure they're with you, calm. I use Lamaze breathing. Didn't do a damn thing for my wife during her pregnancy, but I use it every day. Calms you right down. I think of Sister Grace and Peter Mott and Gail Mott, who are two, older, senior citizens, but protesters who frequently came with us. And they were just Buddha-like about getting arrested. I mean, they figured we might get arrested. There might be no basis for it. And, Sister Grace, many of us recall her. I represented her many times as a result of protest arrests. And Sister Grace, in sum and substance, I'm going to paraphrase now, would say, look, if you're going to cry when they handcuff us, we can't hang out. So, just be prepared for that. I've been in a holding cell next to her. She's very calming. Unfortunately, we don't get that anymore. But recognize the fact that any charge that you are charged with might be completely bogus. So right to the end, law is like a turtle on weed. It's slow and it meanders. It'll save you, but not in the next 20 minutes. So it won't stop you from being charged with something you shouldn't be charged with. You can be charged with assault in the second degree. If a police officer says I suffered physical injury because this person touched me or, caused a hangnail or whatever, that's assault in the second degree. It's a serious charge. Obstruction of justice is pretty much the legal term for criminally pissing off a cop. He got in my way, so I felt like I was obstructed. Riot and conspiracy are harder to charge, but they have been charged. All these people were together and they had a common plan. So they had a conspiracy. They conspired to what? Exercise their constitutional rights? Maybe. So a lot of these charges get thrown out afterwards, but it doesn't mean that you can't be charged and you won't be charged. Can you use your body or your car to slow or to keep ice from reaching its destination? Well, we saw what happened in Minneapolis. You want to keep yourself safe. And what will happen, what can happen, what happened here on the Court Street Bridge, for example, is during protests, you may be blocked in with a group of other people by law enforcement on one side and on the other side. It's called kettling. If they kettle you and you can't go anywhere, then are you obstructing? Well, they'll say that you are, and you might get arrested for obstructing. So, there could be tear gas, there could be pepper spray, there could be a lot of that stuff. So, what do? Well, how do you prepare for these types of possible interactions? One of the best resources I've found is the New York Immigration Coalition. If you go online and you look at their stuff, it's extensive. I'd recommend going to the page that has community immigration resources for New Yorkers. So here's some examples. These are the cards I was telling you about. You don't have to memorize anything. You can get these cards. They'll send you these cards. You can print them out if you want to. But it's a good, succinct statement of what your rights are. One side is for you. You have the right to. The other side is for the cops. These are my rights. And you can just display those. Here's a good enforcement checklist. What happens? What do you want to think about if you're having these types of interactions with law enforcement agents or people who contend that they are law enforcement agents? Are they really law enforcement agents? Do they have documentation of that? Is there an indication that they are? Know your rights is a great thing. That this is also on their website now. I know that we're here for the Urban League, but I don't want to detract from that. But this website has a lot of good resources. So they have good background information. What to do if you have interaction with Border Patrol. We're within 100 miles of a border, so you could have interaction with Border Patrol on the Thruway, on the Northway, anywhere around here. You could be subjected to a Border Patrol confrontation as well. So, are you a U.S. citizen is usually their first question. If you answer yes, you don't have to have proof of that. And, you don't want to lie about it. Other resources on their website, these preparedness guides are really good. Particularly if you're thinking about either I might be in the zone of danger, basically, as far as being detained or arrested by an ICE agent, or I might be somebody who gets detained or arrested not because of my immigration status, but because I'm going to go participate in a protest. These preparedness guides are really good for how do I think about this? What do I prepare before I go? If you're interested in learning more, there's another presentation coming up here that you can sign, also free, also online. Thank you, COVID. We don't have to go anyplace anymore. We could just sit in front of our computers. But another kind of a know your rights presentation on January 21st. There's a link which isn't live here on the next page, I think. Yeah, but we'll go back here. Any of these organizations, the Monroe County Bar Association, Rochester Black Bar Association, or GRAWA, have live links where you can sign up for free. If you want to get more information about where the legal standards are and what your rights are as far as interactions with ICE agents or other law enforcement agents, either in the course of a protest or otherwise. Hey, I recognize one of those speakers. But that will be a good panel as well. if you're interested in getting more information. Okay, are we about at the time for questions, Shannon?
You're definitely at the time for questions,
All right,
Don.
let's have some questions then.
Thank you. So we've been tracking them in the chat. So we'll start with those, and then please, anyone who has questions, feel free. But this was one first, I want to thank you because this was wonderful. And we did look for that video. We did not find one with expletives in it, so we weren't sure that's the one that you wanted. But we did find some videos around the.
If I find it real quick, can I play it, Candace?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Should I do
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And
All
then
right.
we can all see each other.
Okay.
So,
And then I will find that video, and when I got it, I'll let you know.
okay. So while you do that, quick question. You mentioned the number of the form, and someone wanted to just check that. Is it the I-200? Is that the form that you mentioned?
One of the forms. I mean, there are I guess 2 or 3 different ones. One that has been used is the I-200. It doesn't really fit well into this circumstance. It looks, the thing that you need to know is that it looks deceptively like a warrant, but it is not signed by a judge. So the only thing that you really need to pay attention to is the signature. Is the signature a judicial signature? And it will say, like, Justice of the Supreme Court, or Monroe County Judge, or some designation like that that lets you know that, in fact, this is a judicial signature. If it's not a judicial signature, I don't care if it's on the back of a dirty cocktail napkin. It's no good, and it's not going to give them any authority to enter. And you're in a much better position to exercise that ability to keep them from entering if the door is still closed. So keep the door closed if you have that type of a barrier available, until you are certain that there is a legal right to enter. Now, let's say there is a warrant with a judicial signature, somehow, they have a warrant they've shown probable cause to a judge who has signed a warrant. What should you do at that point? Let them in. Don't resist, because they will take the door down if you don't. If they've got legal authority to take the door down, they will do it. So, if there's a warrant signed by a judge, then you're in a different circumstance. That's the key to the whole thing. Candace, I found the video.
All right. Okay.
So we can, if I can pop this up.
And make sure you're sharing your sound.
Okay, I will share my sound and I will play it like. Okay, play it there.
And while Don is sharing that, Shannon did put in the chat links to some of the forums and websites that Don referenced. So if you're not looking at your chat, please go ahead and do so, and you'll see the links in there so that you can get some of that information.
And naturally, I have messed up the sharing my sound thing again. It looks like, I tell you what.
Quick question while you're looking at that. You talked about using a passport to show your citizenship.
Yep.
Would an expired passport work as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, okay, now I can't even stop this. What's going on? So,
Not working?
Any type of citizenship document would be great. But you've got what you got, so that's
not a problem. If you want to send us the link, Don, we can also send that out to you.
All right, I'll do that.
Well.
That's probably going to work better at this point.
Okay. Yep. Send us the link, and we can either pop it in the chat or we can send it to people afterwards.
Okay.
question, is law enforcement obligated to tell you why they have pulled you over?
Legally, yes. Does that mean they'll do it? No.
No.
So, the reason why you're being detained and why you're being stopped provides a basis for the level of intrusion. If the reason is we got a tip that there's a kilo of cocaine in your trunk, they can do a lot more intrusive things than you didn't use your blinker back there at the last stop sign. So, then in that circumstance, do they have the ability to say, well, get out of the car because we're going to search because we think there's contraband or there's weapons in the car? Yeah, in that circumstance, they have more authority to be able to say, we want you to get out of the car because we're going to conduct at least an initial search. So, does it mean that they're going to comply with that? No, it doesn't mean they're going to comply with that. But
Fair enough. Richard has some concerns about ICE, but one of them is, what is the role of our local police in protecting us?
Oh, that's a great question, Richard. All right. I just put the video in the chat because that's apparently the best I can do.
Okay.
So there we go. There's been a lot of back and forth on that in different jurisdictions. And here, supposedly, at least, the declaration is that the local authorities are not going to assist ICE or federal authorities in the execution of their duties. But as far as standing between us and ICE, I wouldn't count on any of that. If ICE is behaving unlawfully, for example, is it the duty of local authorities to intervene? Sure, it is. Are they going to do it? I doubt it, although I've seen a lot of AI videos on Facebook or whatever that shows, local authorities intervening when ICE is behaving unlawfully. I don't anticipate that happening on a very regular basis. I mean, you don't get a lot of Eugene Goodmans. Remember the guy at the Capitol who redirected the rioters away from the room where the senators were hiding? I mean, he's one of a kind because he's one of a kind. You're not going to see that kind of law enforcement response for the most part.
And can ICE be criminally charged for crimes if they're
Another great question. Can they be? Yes, they're not above the law. So, Pam Bondi now is trying to block out any state investigation of the Minneapolis circumstance. And the Minneapolis Bureau of Criminal Investigation is saying, well, we don't have access to any of the witnesses, and we don't have access to the other information that we need to do an investigation. So, yeah, I guess there's nothing we can do. That was I forget what his name is, but that was the head of the Criminal Investigation Bureau. Okay, he's just a bootlicker. The video alone is enough to go into the grand jury with if they wanted to. And you know what? The video wasn't taken by law enforcement. Find who took the video, put them in the grand jury. They can verify and they can authenticate the video. They can play it, and grand jurors can make their information and their determination from that. You don't really need, I mean, there could be more than that, but you don't need more than that. And can the federal authorities say, well, the state doesn't have any authority to investigate crimes within its jurisdiction or charge state offenses within its jurisdiction? No, they can't say that. That's not how the federalism works. That's not how the Supremacy Clause works. Why do they say that? Because Trump can't pardon anyone from a state offense. He can pardon federal offenses, not state offenses. So they want to protect their, designated thugs, basically.
All right, your words, not ours. And can you explain a little bit more about your comment about being 100 miles from a border? and encountering Customs and Border Patrol.
Yep, any border, and I'm not convinced any longer that that is going to be an enforceable boundary. I don't really think it is. But if we are within 100 miles of a border, which we are, if you go right through Buffalo, you're to Canada, right? Border Patrol has basically that buffer of jurisdiction, where anywhere within 100 miles from the border, they can operate as if they were any other law enforcement officer. So it would not be unusual, for example, to encounter Border Patrol on the Thruway or on the Northway or in further upstate New York, for example. So they're out there too. Their vehicles are clearly marked. It's usually green and white, and they have actual insignia, things like that. So, but they have the authority to investigate and prosecute offenses that could take place at the border, like immigration offenses and that sort of thing.
Well, Don, we are just at time, so
Okay.
I want to thank you sincerely for this timely and informative conversation. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, sharing your questions, listening attentively, and most importantly, developing a plan, right? What is your plan going to be to protect yourself, to protect your family, as we move through these uncertain times? There will be a survey at the end of this recording. Once you exit, we please ask you to just take a moment and fill out that survey. Let us know your thoughts, give us suggestions for the future. We want to make sure that we're bringing presentations to you that are going to be valuable to you. But with that, I thank you again. I wish you a wonderful weekend.